Mustafa Fetouri, an academic and award-winning journalist, joins me now on this latest development in Libya. Good to see you, Mustafa. And 32 killed, 150 wounded. That's some figure. Is there a chance that the current state of anarchy in Tripoli will end soon?
Well, thank you for having me. Pleased to be with you again, Lewis. And if you mean the current, the escalation and the fighting that we have seen over the last 2 days, it has already more or less ended. There is no serious fighting over the last 2 days, starting yesterday evening and afternoon rather, until today. There has been small skirmishes at the outside of the western gate of the capital, Tripoli. But if you mean, the larger conflict in Libya, whether it will end soon or not, I'm afraid it will not. This is not the end of it, and it's only another episode of the continued violence Libya has been living with, and Libyans have been living with for the last 11 years since the NATO-backed rebels took over the country. So it's another, cycle of the same vicious circle that is very likely to go on for a while. We might see.
Mustafa, let me jump in here, Mustafa. If this is another cycle, tell us, if you will, the reasons for the recent escalation of violence in Libya.
Well, the reasons, the recent escalation that started on last Friday was initially it was between two armed groups, two militias inside Tripoli itself. Both of them are supposed to be part of the government in Tripoli, the government of Mr. Dbeiba, which is called the Government of National Unity. And the initial fighting erupted because one of the groups took over some properties of the other group, or some of its, premises, if you like, in the western part of the city. And then led to larger conflict, as we have seen. But of course, those groups, they have their own alliances, if you like, within Tripoli and outside Tripoli, that goes all the way to the other government, which is outside Tripoli, the parliament-appointed government led by Mustafa Fetouri. And he apparently tried to, for the last sixth time, I think, in a row, tried to take over the capital and come into the capital and be the government of the day, if you like. Try taking advantage of what is going on, because some of the militias inside Tripoli are supporting him. Instead of supporting the government they are supposed to be supporting, which is the Government of National Unity that's already in Tripoli. But that attempt failed to materialize, and Mr. Bashar could not make it into the capital. And this is probably the sixth or seventh time he tried to do so. And I remember we have discussed this in your program before, about 6 months ago or something. So it's a kind of, the kind of violence game that governs the whole life of Libyans every day in and day out. So it's not something unlikely to be repeated again. It's very likely to be repeated. It will be repeated. The question is when, it's not if. Yes.
Well, if it's when and not if, taking off the conditionality clause, two bodies, the continental body AU and the United Nations, have called for a ceasefire. How effective are these calls?
Well, we already, as I explained, we already have some kind of ceasefire. There's no firing anymore. There's no fighting anymore. And the good thing about the whole thing here, if there's a good thing out of it, is the fact that it's very unlikely to further escalate into a larger conflict around the capital Tripoli in the scale that we have seen 2 years ago, 2019, 2020, when Mr. Haftar, based in eastern Libya, tried to take over the government and the capital Tripoli, and he was defeated. This time, it's very unlikely that we will see something, another episode of violence at that scale. But as I said before, tensions remain high, and this is just another cycle, of the same, more or less of the same thing. And when will it erupt again? That depends on many factors, including, for example, if Mr. Bashagha will try to reposition himself, militarily speaking, somewhere around the capital and try once again to enter the capital by force. But, in terms of, will there be another more serious conflict? Not immediately anyway, but there will be somewhere. As the calls for the ceasefire by the United States and the Arab League, as well as the African Union, they are relevant actually, because most of these organizations, all of these organizations, especially the African Union and the Arab League, are out of the equation in Libya. They haven't been actively doing anything in Libya since 2011. I mean, the Western countries, especially the United States, the United Kingdom, France, they just shut the door for everybody else, and they are handling the Libyan file according to their own interests and their wishes. Unfortunately, they find the local proxies, so-called Libyan politicians, who are welcoming this, and even the United Nations mediation of it is not materializing anywhere.
All right.
It's not going,
okay.
anywhere.
I think we have to go. I'd like to thank you for your time, Professor Mustafa Fetouri.
Thank you.